Hey there, and welcome back to 31 Days of Horror, and we are on day 21. If you have missed the previous 20 days, I have 20 more videos if you want to check out my channel. Every day is another horror movie review, one for each day in October. And today I checked out M. Night Shyamalan's Knock at the Cabin. This movie came out a few years ago. It is actually based on a book called Cabin at the End of the World. I My very best friend, she is an avid reader, and she checked out this book. She really enjoyed it, and she was excited to see the film. I had initially, when the movie was first advertised and when it was first coming out, I had intended on reading the book before I saw the movie, which is why I waited so long to actually watch it. But kind of life got in the way. I never got around to reading the book. And when I was checking out things to watch, it's something that has been on my watch list for, a few years now since it came out. And I figured I would give it a watch and let you know what I thought. So it is now fairly straightforward story. There is a remote cabin in the woods. A family is staying at this cabin. It is two men and their daughter. She's, I don't know, maybe about 5 or 6 years old in the movie. It's kind of hard to tell age-wise, but she's very smart. She's articulate, but she's also not, super old. She's definitely a small child in the movie. And then her two fathers, one is a lawyer. I'm not sure what the other one does for work, but they are a good foil, relationship. They, you know, are very well rounded. The three of them. And so they're staying at a remote cabin in the woods, just on a vacation. I'm not sure if it was a getaway weekend or something, but they're staying at a cabin. And a man shows up, makes friends with the daughter, whose name is Wen, and then three more people join him. They all have weapons. They end up tying up the fathers and essentially telling them that in the next 24 hours, the family needs to make the decision to kill one of the members of the family, or the apocalypse is going to happen. And at certain points in time, if they do not make a decision, then one of the four people that has come to the cabin asking them to make this decision needs to be sacrificed in order to, I'm not really entirely sure why, but in order to stop the apocalypse from happening, a member of the family needs to be chosen and sacrificed by the family in order to stave off the apocalypse. And the movie itself is a very claustrophobic, kind of closed room, sort of thriller. And I would say, even though it's kind of touted as a thriller, I would say it's more of a horror story, because literally when I was sitting here, I have a family of three myself. It's my husband and my son and I. And the thought of being put in that position of being told by strangers that I'm not necessarily sure I can trust, that as a family we need to pick one of us to unalive in order to stop the apocalypse, is really anxiety inducing, I think, for me, because to have the weight of that kind of decision put on you, and to sort of figure out, even for yourself, if it's true, would you sacrifice the people you love for the greater good? If it's not true, why are these people doing this kind of thing? That being said, you would think that maybe this is going to be a slow burn type of movie, and it most certainly wasn't. There are some familiar faces that you would recognize in this film, the biggest of them being Dave Bautista, who we've seen as Drax in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. He was the spy in the My Spy movies, and he, of course, was a former wrestler. And this is another one of his films. And another familiar face that we'll see in this is actually Rupert Grint, known for playing Ron Weasley in the Harry Potter series and doing a brilliant job with that. And he plays a very different character in this, and it's very exciting for me to see him get to do something different. I've seen him in a few other roles since, Harry Potter, and I always very much enjoy kind of seeing him show up and seeing his different acting chops. And I think he does an excellent job playing dramatic roles. He's definitely great in a sort of comedic role. Um, and it's interesting to see, this very British man also playing in kind of an American, from up north, the New England area type of character. So he's got that kind of Boston accent. Um, and I think both of them did a great job. Everybody who's in this movie did an excellent job of sort of playing their character as their character would do the different actions. And so that sounds odd because isn't that what all actors do? But essentially, the actors who are playing the four people who are coming to this cabin to tell them that it's the apocalypse, they have to play normal people. So their characters are normal people who are experiencing something extraordinary and acting according to that, but acting differently than they normally would. So these actors are taking these characters, learning what their normal reactions would be to things or how they normally would do things, and then they're the way that their character's behaving in the movie needs to contradict who their character is and convey that to the audience. And I think they all do a great job of that, which is so strange a concept when you try to put it into words. So like, I'm pretending to be this guy. This guy is very like down to earth, chill, never reacts badly, isn't angry. So I have to portray that character. But in this situation this character's in, he's quick to anger, he's crazy, he's off the rails. And somehow in a very short period of time, we have to tell the audience that this guy is very mild mannered. This is not usual for him. But right now he's bonkers, and have us believe that. And I thought the way that the characters were done and the way that the movie kind of plays out does a really great job of this. And I think that's a testament to the actors that they cast in this, that we have this sense of self in the characters that's then being changed because of the movie's circumstances. And we also, I think we see that with the family as well a little bit. And we see a lot of interesting concepts being brought up that I think highlight some things that would make for a realistic kind of scary environment too. The couple in the cabin is a gay couple who are married, and they have adopted their child, Wen, from China, I believe. And that's a very real circumstance. There's a couple of moments in the movie where, in order to do the adoption process, they sort of had to pretend that, one of the fathers is is a mother's brother so that they can go through the adoption process. They feel very targeted because they're a gay couple in a remote cabin, and then these people show up and say one of you has to, not live past this. And that feels very, targeted based on their sexuality, because they are used to being targeted for their lifestyle, for their love, and things like that. So there's that very combative nature based on that. There is a connection between one of the people who comes to the cabin and the couple themselves, which lends itself to believing that it is a targeted attack, that the apocalypse isn't real, that, these other factors are at play. And I think those are all very legitimately scary things, even if you didn't bring in the apocalypse concept. And I also think that it's cool because it tells a story that is kind of an LGBT story. As part of it, this couple who cannot have a child of their own, obviously, so that they need to adopt, and the different things that go into that, the different prejudices that are encountered based on different lifestyles and sexual preferences and attractions, and the amount of having to kind of be on the ready, be on the defensive, that so many people in the LGBTQ community um, have to experience on the regular, that they have to live in this sort of fear. And then, so that's a very real, visceral kind of life experience that an entire population of people go through every day. So you already have that kind of tension going on in the film. And then added to that is the potential apocalypse, this impending doom. There's moments, they're watching the television, they're hearing about disasters, they're hearing about natural disasters, they're hearing about unnatural disasters, they're questioning whether or not this group of 4 people is just playing a trick or trying to like harass them, if they've orchestrated this elaborate ruse, or if this is legitimately what's happening and it just happens to be a coincidence that, they're a very, targeted demographic as it is, and then they were, kind of chosen for this particular thing. Is that a coincidence? And there's a lot of those tensions that are brought up that I think lend it to being a scarier story than just the basic premise would necessarily put out there. And certainly not in the things that are exactly happening, but in sort of the tensions that are built. It reminds me a lot of The Day After Tomorrow, which I have to say is honestly one of the scariest films I've ever seen, and it's not a horror movie. But what's scary about it is that when you're talking about something like the apocalypse, or you're talking about like world-ending, like extinction events, or climate change type extinction events, those things are real. Those things have happened. Um, we have records of extinction events happening for multiple times on this planet. We can look back scientifically and see that there have been things that have wiped out different dinosaurs at different periods in time. Those are all real things that can happen. So then when we start seeing aspects on our own planet that lend itself to this possibility, I think that that's way scarier to me than a monster, or a monster attacking, or somebody coming at you with a knife, or something supernatural, because the natural world we've experienced is pretty unstoppable. You can't stop a tsunami. You can just get out of its way. You can't stop a hurricane. You can just try to lessen the damage that it causes. So I think when you have these natural things, or these naturally unexplainable, no, when I say unexplainable, I don't mean unexplainable by science, but they're not man-made forces. They're not things like, oh, we launched the nukes, because the thing is, if that's a man-made thing. But if it's like, no, there's earthquakes happening, the tectonic plates are shifting, that's not stuff we're doing. I mean, we can influence it, but the earth and nature is going to decide when those things happen and when they don't. And I think that's far scarier to me than like a guy showing up with a knife or anything like that. Even though those things tend to feel relentless, nature is far more relentless, and it can be far scarier. And so I think this movie plays a lot on those things too. So you have that tension coming from the LGBTQ plus community, of being targeted, being judged, being in danger simply because of their lifestyle, feeling isolated, possibly feeling helpless and hopeless. And the cabin kind of represents that. And then to have this unstoppable force that is essentially nature. It's also interesting that they reference like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, that's what these 4 people may be, or that this is an apocalypse, but they managed to do so without really mentioning religion a whole lot. They do quote Revelation a bit, but other than that, it's not like we were chosen by God, this, God, like there's not a lot of, religious in this. It's just, this is the apocalypse. We got visions. We were told this is what we're trying to do to stop it. This is all I can tell you. This is what's up. That kind of ambiguous nature of not knowing why now, why these visions, why this, why that. Not having that why also adds to the tension and the anxiety and the fear in a lot of this, because these people genuinely believe that what they're doing is the right thing, the good thing for everybody. And the people who are essentially being victimized by this are feeling persecuted, they're feeling targeted, they're feeling like ostracized, like outsiders. And essentially they are. It may not be for the reasons that traditionally they would be, but it's interesting that the movie plays on those tensions. And it's interesting that even though verbally in dialogue it's sort of said like, well, it has nothing to do with it, but we don't really know. And I think it's a cool thing to look at. I think it's an important thing to look at. And I also think if you put yourself in the shoes of the couple that, and the family, that they're doing what they think is best. I don't think that they make any decisions that are necessarily rash in this movie or do anything wrong. I don't think everybody in this film is doing exactly what they think they need to be doing to do the best for the people that they love, for the people that they care about, for the world. But whether or not that's actually the correct thing is always sort of left ambiguous. And I liked that. M. Night Shyamalan has had some hits and misses. He has a lot of really great story ideas, but a lot of times he's so focused on trying to subvert expectations or hide the twist or, surprise the audience that sometimes the overall story suffers. Or sometimes plain and simple casting just isn't right. I think the movie The Happening is a great example of this, that the concept of The Happening is actually fascinating. It's a great horror concept, especially since we know science-wise that plants do have the ability to communicate, and that many plants and animals even do have the ability to poison us if they so felt like doing so. Nature is probably the scariest thing, really, on this planet. But the problems with that was a lot of the casting was you cast Mark Wahlberg as the supposedly science teacher who's very, very smart. And I don't mean this in any sort of harsh way, but the way that Mark Wahlberg tends to deliver his lines leaves you questioning his character's intelligence a lot of the time. That's not saying that Mark Wahlberg is smart or dumb. I have really no opinion on the matter. I don't know the man. But the way that he delivers his lines has this very kind of lower IQ, tough guy, Boston, he's quicker to punch you than he is to have a conversation with you. You're not entirely sure if this man's ever read a book, sort of delivery of his lines. So then to cast him in this role where he's supposed to be some sort of savior, or he's supposed to figure this whole thing out, and that he's a science teacher and he's all of these things, it's just not very believable casting. On the flip side of that, I think this is sort of a bit of a reconciliation for that, because every one of the characters that's introduced in this is believable in the role that they're in. Even Dave Bautista, he's a teacher, he's a coach. And even looking at him before he had his, slim down, when he was very muscular, he's a very big man. Even looking at him like that, the way that he speaks, the way that he delivers his lines, the way that he stands, is all conducive to a real person, a teacher who cares about kids, who cares about coaching, who is very smart, who is very eloquent, who just happens to be a big dude. And totally believable. So I think in casting, they went in a much better direction with this movie. And I also think there wasn't really a big twist. And I think that's also very important, because I think sometimes M. Night Shyamalan's movies get muddy in the middle because they're trying to build to this significant, like, oh my God moment. I mean, everything can't be The Sixth Sense. Everything can't be Signs. And even though those particular movies, they're brilliant and they're fun and they're great, you can't be a one-trick pony. And I think this is definitely a really great outing from M. Night Shyamalan. I think he's a quality filmmaker. I just think sometimes he tries too hard to surprise the audience. Um, I think the tension's great, the violence is a minimum, but the concept is scary, the tension is built well, and I think it concludes reasonably. I found myself happy with the conclusion, even though I did have some questions, but I always have questions at the ends of movies. I don't like it when a movie pretends like it's wrapped up in a nice, neat little package, but then it's things like, but wait a minute, like they stole a car. Like I know this happened, but like they still stole a car. You still can't do that. Like I know all your friends got murdered at a cabin in the woods, but like you can't just steal a car. Or all of your friends were murdered at a cabin in the woods. Someone's gonna ask, like, where's your girlfriend? If you show back up and you go on a college trip and you go with your boyfriend, your best friend's girlfriend, and then like your best goofy single friend, and you come back alone. Okay, you survived. That's great. But I've got some questions. Like, I want to know, when they show the like 6 months from now. Okay, that's great. But like, how did they explain what happened to their friends? Did cops go to the cabin and find the bodies and somehow you were exonerated from having any responsibility? Did they find a killer? Did they go back to the cabin and they just didn't find anything and they were like, guess your friends disappeared because there's no evidence? I have a lot of questions like that. This movie leaves me with a lot of questions in the end, but I don't necessarily think that's a negative thing. I think the movie's long enough on its own, and the questions are just mine. They're not important. It's not like the movie is not left open-ended. So there's no worry for that. Like I said, there's just kind of a couple of things here and there that I wonder about, but that's not necessarily a criticism. That's just me. Is it a traditional horror film? I would say no. But is it scary? I would say yes. I definitely think that a lot of people would find this to be frightening. Definitely would think people would find this to be disturbing in concept. And I think especially parents, I think would find this to be a very difficult movie to watch from concept. But that being said, I definitely think that this is an enjoyable outing, and I think you're going to get a positive movie out of this one from M. Night Shyamalan. So I would love to hear what you thought about it. If you've seen it, if you've not seen it, I'd love to hear if you're interested. And leave me a comment down below. Hit subscribe if you feel like it. And if you haven't checked them out already, I have 20 other videos for the 31 Days of Horror. And hopefully I will see you tomorrow. Have a great day.